Hi, my name is Dr. Felicia. I'm a licensed psychologist, and today I'm going to be answering the question about how our cultural norms and traditions can affect our parenting styles and communication. Sometimes I'll get this question, especially from parents who are immigrants to the United States. They'll wonder, how can they keep their cultural values and traditions while still parenting in ways that are most beneficial to the child? And it's an important question, especially because some of the research nowadays and some of the advice that we get about being parents in the United States does not always take into account cultural norms, values, traditions, and practices. So it can be really confusing and sometimes stressful for somebody who's an immigrant or who comes from a different cultural background other than American, applying some of these parenting principles, especially when it comes to communication. And so I want to reassure you that it's not going to be as difficult as you think. It doesn't have to be either or. Many aspects of good parenting are found across cultures. And so that's really important to remember. And before I go on, I do want to remind you that I have a video that talks about this concept in a more general, from a more general point of view. And it basically discusses how, as parents, we can get our kids to open up to us more. So I would encourage you to watch that video in addition to this video. But going back to the issue about cultural practices and parenting, sometimes people wonder, how can I keep my traditional cultural values and still parent in a way that fits with the culture, not sacrificing my own values and cultural practices and whatnot? So that's a question I get often. And it's important to remember when you are thinking about this, what are your goals? It's very important to understand, first of all, what your goals are. Goals are goals regardless of whatever culture you come from. So it's important to think about the picture of the type of parent that you want to be. Sometimes people think that remaining in their culture and following traditional cultural practices may come at the expense of being a good parent, or they think that if they want to be a good parent, that they're going to have to forsake certain cultural traditions and values and practices. And I don't look at it that way at all. Culture in and of itself is neutral. So we have to remember that. Culture is neutral. Culture affects how we view things. And also culture changes over time. Every culture that we are in right now didn't look the same now as it did 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So those things are really important. When someone asks this question, the first thing I would like for you to remember is that you have to be flexible. You have to be flexible with your cultural practices, especially when you are not in your home country and you're now in a different country. Think about what you can do that honors your culture, but at the same time is consistent with the values and goals that you have. And so the research shows that there are two factors that are really important when people are parenting. The first one is having demands of your child. So you want to have high demands of your child. You don't want to set the bar low for them. The second is responsiveness. And so you want to, it's called authoritative parenting, but authoritative parents have both high demands for their kids, and also they're highly responsive to their children's needs and desires and things like that. So if you remember two things, demands and responsiveness, you want to have both in working with your children. And you can do this in a way that honors your culture. So if you can kind of hold on to those two things as anchors when you're working with your kids, then that will really help you go a long way with your parenting. And also, I'm sure you clicked on this video because you value the long-term rewards of healthy parenting over sticking to arbitrary cultural norms. And so it's really important that sometimes if you're feeling you're in a position, well, am I going to honor my culture? Am I going to honor my kid? To me, the answer is pretty obvious. You want to honor your child. And so, and I'm not saying that all the issues with parenting are going to be one or the other, but I found that the parents that have the easiest time with this are the ones that look at culture as a tool rather than a list of rules that they must stick to. They understand that culture is flexible. They understand that culture is changing, and they use culture as a tool rather than something that rules them. And so it's important to, before you go about figuring this out as a parent, what I would encourage you to do is to take some time and journal about your own experience as a child and how you were parented. And the reason I would encourage you to do this is because with any type of behavior, a lot of it is learned and a lot of it is automatic. And so you might find yourself parenting a certain way simply because, well, that's how I was parented, or that's what we do in our culture, without really understanding the impact of those behaviors, as well as the true reasons as to why you're doing it. And so it'd be really unfortunate to do something that's not helpful for your kid simply because, well, that's how we've always done things, or that's how I was parented. While there's certain values that are timeless and certain things that remain the same over time, there are certain things also that do change with time. And so it's important to have that flexibility between holding on to what is true and what is helpful over time, and also being willing to be flexible and be willing to change things. And so the first thing I would encourage you to do is journal. Journal about what it was like for you as a child, what you liked about your parents, what types of parenting practices made you feel valued, honored, and listened to. And then also think about some things that you didn't like about how your parents or how you were parented, right? Things that maybe made you feel ashamed, things that made you, that made it difficult for you to achieve the goals of life. And this is not a session where you're going to necessarily be blaming people or anything like that. Sometimes people think, well, I don't want to do this. What's the point? I don't want to just sit here and have a pity party for myself. It's not that at all. Look at it as an analysis of what worked for you and what didn't work. And then think about what you would like to pass on from the way you were parented to your kids. And also think about things that you want to leave behind. This isn't an all or nothing exercise. There are parents that, their parents, anytime parents parent their children, there are going to be things that they did well and things they didn't do well. And so you are looking from a retrospective point of view and seeing what you liked, what you didn't like, what you're going to continue, and what you're going to stop. And also think about some things that you do automatically that may be just a result of tradition. And think about, well, do you think that these are things you want to continue, things you don't? It's really a time for analysis and reflection. So I want you to journal about all of those things. Put together a picture of what your parenting, what you want your parenting to look like. Think about the things that are specific and unique to your home or your birth culture, right? Things that you liked, traditions, phrases, ways of looking at children and ways of viewing parenting. And I want you to stick those in the things that stick that in like a list of things that you're going to continue. And then think about some things that maybe as you've gone along further in your journey of parenting, I don't think I like this as much anymore, and take that out. The wonderful thing about us being a more globalized society is that we can pick and choose the best from what we like about culture, and also leave behind the things that we don't like, and put together a new synthesized form that works for us. And so that's really important that you think about that as you're parenting. With many collectivist cultures, they tend to, when I say collectivist cultures, American culture tends to be more individualistic. So it's more about focusing on the success and achievement and perspective of one person. Whereas collectivist cultures, they tend to view themselves as part of a greater society. And there isn't anything wrong or right or better or worse about individualistic or collectivist cultures. They just function differently. In collectivist cultures, there tend to be sort of more strict or stricter hierarchies between the genders, between social classes, and between ages. Something that's good about that is the respect for the elderly is held at an all-time high. So from, Japan is an example of a collectivist culture, and they tend to regard the elderly with great reverence and respect. Okay, so when you think about parenting, that can go a long way in terms of how your children interact with you, how you expect them to interact with other elders or other people that are older than them in terms of showing respect. But sometimes in collectivist cultures, the demands for respect may come at the expense of authenticity and warmth. And so in some of those cultures, respect may be looked at as something that is demanded rather than something that is earned. And so, and when I work with individuals from collectivist cultures, I'm from a collectivist culture as well. Sometimes people feel like they don't have much of a voice. They feel like as children, they were expected to be seen and not heard. You're just supposed to do what you're told, and there isn't a lot of warmth between the parent and the child. Now, that's not always the case, but sometimes in collectivist cultures, I hear that insight more often, or I hear that perspective more often. And so it's really important to understand, some of what's just automatically expected because of a culture, and ask yourself, is this something that I want to do? So one of the most important things that I would encourage anybody going through this journey is you need to be flexible and not rigid in your perspective. Many times parents have difficulty with certain tasks, and sometimes the easiest way to get past that hurdle in parenting is just look at what your child could be going through from their perspective. So as parents, we tend to be, absorbed in our own perspective, but look at it from the child's perspective. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to parent from the child's perspective, right? If you parented exclusively from your child's perspective, things would not be good. But when you're able to be flexible, being able to see yourself as a parent, but also able to see yourself as your child sees you, that goes a great way. It goes a long way, and it makes a great deal of difference in how people parent. Something else that I found too is that parenting and communication does not always have to be verbal. And so sometimes I'll hear, some people tell me that, look, when they grew up, they did not talk a lot with their parents. It was very much do what you're told. I'm the parent, you're the child. And there just wasn't a lot of communication around things that were not school related or task oriented. And so a parent in this position might have challenges, understandably, just talking with their kid on an everyday basis about school and friends and hobbies. One thing I would recommend is getting a journal. There's several types of journals that you can use. There's some that have questions in there, and you can find them on Amazon or in any bookstore. That's just a guided journal. So, there are questions there that your child can answer, that you can answer, and you just pass them back and forth. And you will learn so much, from doing an exercise like this. A child may not feel necessarily comfortable talking to you about something, but they would feel comfortable sharing it with you in writing. And so that's one way that you can do this. Another thing that you can do, and I talked about this in my video about communication, is just creating space for you and your child to talk. So you don't necessarily have to fill that space with a lot of talk, but as you engage in shared activities, maybe you're doing some chores around the house and they're going to be doing those chores alongside you, or maybe you're just working together in the same space. Having those unstructured spaces where you have time together, even if it's for a few minutes each day, goes a long way in terms of helping with communication. And so again, the most important thing that I would take away from this, if you're a parent, understanding how to reconcile your cultural values with modern parenting, is that you must be flexible. Try new things. If one thing doesn't work, try something else. Ask your child's perspective. It's really important. You can do this verbally, or you can do it through a journal. But what are some things that you like about our parenting or my parenting? And then what are some things that you would like to change, would like for me to change it? It's not for you to just do everything they say, but give you a perspective of how they view you. That's really important. And again, going back to the research shows that two factors are really important in parenting: high demands and high responsiveness. So if you can think about those two anchors, am I having high expectations of my children and communicating them, and also am I responsive to them? And when I think about responsiveness, I think about warmth. If they communicate a need to you or desire, are you closed off or are you listening? Remember that parenting is a journey. No one gets it perfect. No one is doing this right all the time, but it's really important that we remember that flexibility is important. And you also want to remember that culture is a tool. Culture is neutral and culture changes. So there's no rule that says you have to do everything the way that you were parented or the way your culture demands. Rather, think about what you like and what you feel is working well for you in parenting from your culture, while being willing to incorporate other, other demands and values of the culture that you're in. And so that way you kind of get the best of both worlds. And so let me know in the comments section what other sorts of videos you would like to see. If you feel that you have your own perspective on this, please feel free to share this with me. I'd love to hear from other parents about how they are navigating this journey. And so click the subscribe button if you find this content helpful. Also, if you would like to book a free 10-minute consultation with me, you can do so through my website, and that link is in the description box. You're doing, as if you're here clicking on this video, you are already made a great first step. So I don't want you to beat yourself up and think, oh, I'm going to hear about all the things I'm doing wrong. That's not the case. Keep trying, keep working at it. Parenting is a journey, and we learn along the way. Our kids learn along the way. And so, it's something that is valued, and parents are valued. So keep up the good work. May you have a peaceful and blessed day. Bye-bye.